And they did work hard yesterday. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got, if you're looking for sort of, he says this, how do they react to it on the pitch? Then you can't fault them for intensity yesterday.
From what I hear, there's not a lot of levity about Man City training. I was told that Micah Richards was told off for smiling too much recently. So I mean, I think there is an issue with the way that Mancini handles the squad. Maybe it's we get back to clearly the Italian, the hard school of Italian management, with which Capello comes from as well. Maybe again it's a question of some of the English players. I don't think it's just the English players, but struggling to cope with that. And I think Mancini's move to make Tevez captain, which Tevez talked about yesterday or the day before, was an interesting and a clever move actually, because I think Tevez was unhappy there and there were issues there. He and Bellamy were close. Bellamy was drummed out of the club. So I think getting Tevez on side was very important.
Yeah, you make a point here in your piece today, Paul, that you wonder how 600 million can buy so little entertainment. Do you think that's a concern to the fans or not?
I think it is. Although they've had so many bad years that they probably just want to see City winning things. But at the same time, Mancini's clearly got a conservative mindset. He's an Italian coach with a fundamentally defensive mentality, and it's a surprise to all of us to see three defensive, three holding midfield players effectively in a single top four side. There's no other Premier League team that would be that unambitious, if you like, top Premier League team. So he's got to prove really that he can be that defensive in the structure of the team and still go and attack and win games and be adventurous, because the Premier League is an attacking league, and at the moment City don't look like an attacking side. I would say that when Balotelli gets back in the side, when he's fit, Adam Johnson, when he's played regularly, was left out yesterday, possibly for disciplinary reasons. When he's playing every week, they should have a bit more pace and zest about them. But at the moment, yesterday they ground out that result.
Yes. Do you believe, Ollie, that if he's not pushing the top two, top four before Christmas, he will be sacked? You made the point earlier.
Yeah, I think if he's not in the top four, if they're not in the top four by November, he'll be fired. Yeah, I mean, I think they've spent an awful lot of money and they've got very, very high and exacting standards. We found that out with Mark Hughes. Before Hughes was sacked, we were told, look, we're in this for the long haul, we're patient, we're this, we're that. Then they sacked Hughes, and we knew then exactly what they're about. They're impatient, and fair enough, being impatient with that amount of money. But I think one of the reasons why yesterday was a big win for City and for Mancini was that they've been compared a lot to Chelsea recently, and the kind of evolution of Chelsea.
Yeah.
They're similar models really in that they haven't started from nothing exactly, but they've started from a lower base and spent a lot of money and tried to accelerate quickly. And Chelsea, I think, are deemed to have been fairly successful at it. And so City will be measured against the progress that Chelsea made. And if you look at Chelsea, they had one season under Ranieri after Abramovich came in, and then Mourinho came in and won the title. So, they need to be looking.
Would you agree
there's
with
going to
that,
be pressure on them to win the title very soon.
Yeah, would you agree with that? If they said, OK, your 10th, it's December the 2nd, your 10th, you've got to go. Would you agree with that or not? Well,
I wouldn't agree with that, no, because I didn't think that should have happened to Hughes, and so I don't really think. I think Hughes is probably a better manager than Mancini, but that's just my opinion. So I don't think Hughes should have been fired. I'm not sure about Mancini. I don't know as much about him, but I think he should be given time. Absolutely. I mean, I think, as Matt said, whatever the doubts around what he did at Inter Milan, he won 3 titles on the spin. Didn't he? So I mean, I think he's got to be given more of a chance. And if they're not in the top 6, I think he should still stay and be given a chance, because I think it's a very dangerous road, as we've seen before, to keep chopping and changing your manager. You've got to stick with the guy. Now you've made him your guy and you've given him money. You've got to stick with him.
I mean, I think they'll be around the top 4 or close.
All season.
Well, certainly close enough now. I mean, you see, Tottenham have had a wobble. Arsenal aren't, have had a shocking result yesterday. I mean, but it's not as if there's a top 4 that's disappearing into the distance without them. I think they'll be close enough that he does see through the winter. But the reality of Man City is that if they could have got Jose Mourinho, they would have done, even since they appointed Mancini. So I mean, that's the reality that City are in, is that if the best manager in the world is available, they'll take him tomorrow, whatever it costs.
And whatever happens to the other one.
And he said in the Mail interview last week with Martin Samuel, you know, it took Alex Ferguson 5 or 6 years to impose his mentality on this group of players. Well, Manchester United didn't have a net transfer spend of £300 million in 2 years, so of course it took longer at Manchester United, but he hasn't got that luxury with these owners that you cannot spend £300 million on players and just kind of wheedle your way up the table, you know, from 6th to 5th to 4th.
It's impact,
it has to be quicker than that.
Yeah. Mourinho, going back to Mourinho's the template for that, isn't he? I mean, Mourinho's the guy who came in and lived up to that pressure.
Yeah.
And
he's a nightmare for all other managers.
Yeah.
Were you disappointed with Chelsea yesterday? That it was their first test and they failed it, really?
Yeah, they were very flat.
Fergie says they've had it easy.
Well, I think he's right. They were very flat, and you've seen this with Chelsea before. They win 5 games in a row against weaker opposition. They do get complacent, I think, Chelsea. They do get a bit cocky, and they turned up. I'm not saying they weren't switched on yesterday, but they just looked. They didn't appear to realise that this was a much bigger test, and they were at each other. You know, the players were arguing amongst themselves. Ancelotti was unusually sort of combative with a couple of the players. Drogba gave the manager the eyes as he came off to be replaced by Daniel Sturridge. He wasn't too impressed with that. And then
that was what, 15 minutes before the end when they were desperate for a goal.
Yeah, it was a great look he gave Ancelotti, and then he did the same to the bench as if to say, there's something wrong here. You know, I've just been replaced by a kid. You know, and I'm the top scorer, and it did look odd. It was a measure of Ancelotti's frustration, I think. But that will just give them the little prod they need, I think, to concentrate again.
Whenever we talk about Ancelotti, the reaction is always, but he's in control, he's a winner and everything. That's where Mancini's got to get to, isn't it? I mean, but Ancelotti appears to have the dressing room now under control completely.
He does, yeah, and he's done it with a very different approach. I mean, Mancini, as we say, is the real, you know, whip-cracking type. Ancelotti is far more laid back and a sort of warmer character. I mean, thus far, it's worked very well for him. You know, I personally still think Chelsea are favourites for the title, and you know, my tenor was on them before the season, and will certainly stay on them for until I see a lot more defeats. That's for sure.
So just a blip then for Chelsea.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, I think they're probably favourites for the title as well. I mean, Drogba. Yeah, I think Drogba is one of their best players. I don't like Drogba, and I don't like his attitude, and I think I heard somebody say on the radio the other day that he always gives 100%, and I nearly spat up what I was eating, to be honest. I mean, I was thinking about the time that he was giving 100% in the last game of last season because he wasn't allowed to take a penalty. I mean, you know, I think Chelsea probably are the best team in the division, and I think Drogba's one of the best strikers, but, you know, this stuff about him making eyes at Ancelotti when he goes off yesterday, I wish he'd grow up sometimes. Yeah, to be honest. I'd admire him a lot more.
Do you think he's improved though with his attitude?
I think he's improved a little bit, but he was starting from a pretty low base.
It's funny. I mean, every year there's been this debate of is it the right time to get rid of Drogba, and you look at sort of way Ferguson and Wenger have sort of cast off big players before they go over the hill. You wonder if it had been at those clubs he would have gone, but the trouble is he's so hard to replace. I mean, you know, as a footballer, I agree 100% with Ollie. As a human, he can let himself down with his sort of petulance sometimes, but as a player, as a sort of lone striker, he's awesome, and that makes him incredibly hard to replace. They tried to replace him with Torres, bid 35 odd million. Obviously Liverpool wanted sort of twice that. And that just proves how hard he is to replace. You know, it could be a 50 million deal.
And they need Lampard back as well, because Ramirez, who's apparently a £17 million footballer, didn't look anything like a Premier League player yesterday. He gave the ball away a lot, and he's kind of stick thin and was getting knocked over constantly by the City midfielders who saw the weakness in him and exploited it really. And he was a non-event really on the left side of midfield for Chelsea, and I hope he's going to adapt, because at the moment he doesn't look like he's got the equipment.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Next we get to the nutty professor. That's Arsene Wenger. Is the pressure really getting to the Arsenal manager? We'll have a look at that next.